Today we're going to talk about Almond, a privacy-focused voice assistant, and the latest release now has an add-on for Home Assistant. So let's get started. Before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about the hardware that I'm using. First of all, I am using a Samsung Go Mic Mobile, and the reason I'm doing that is that's the only USB microphone I currently have. I did order another one that will be here later in the week, but I wanted to try this out and see as a proof of concept if this is going to work at all. I'm also using the Odroid Home Assistant Blue, which is an Odroid N2 Plus. I tried this on the Raspberry Pi 4, but it just didn't work for me. And for output audio, I'm using this Sabrent microphone or this USB device here, but I'm using this device as my output for a speaker, and I've basically got a headphone plugged into it now so I can hear what's going on. You don't require a speaker to use this, but it is helpful when especially when you're debugging and troubleshooting, because you do get responses back from the Almond AI. Now with the Raspberry Pi 4, I had some issues with audio, and the audio would just stop working, or it would be choppy and it wouldn't hear some of the stuff I was talking about. So I went ahead and played on the Odroid here, and it's working much, much better. All right, so what we need to do first is we need to install. Oh, and one more thing before I get started. This is very much a brand new thing, at least for me. The version that we're going to be using is the newest add-on version, and it includes the voice capability. Some of the other versions with Almond, you had to install Ada and some other things like that. So we're going to go strictly with just the Almond Edge integration or Almond Edge add-on, and that's going to be something that we'll be able to use for controlling our devices. And I've got some caveats to this, some stuff I've played around with earlier that I'll talk about, because you got to be careful. I ended up doing some interesting things on my network by playing around with Almond. All right, so let's get it installed. And the first thing you're going to go is go over to, well, let me take you to the installation page. There is an add-on for installation of Almond in Home Assistant. It's a third-party add-on, and it goes through, you can see here the link for the Stanford EDU website, and this is where the group is that's building the open source Almond stuff. So we're going to just kind of follow along the guide, and I'm going to take you through it as we go along here. So the first thing we need to do is go to our add-on store. So we'll go to Supervisor, and then our add-on store. And in order to install this, since it is a third-party add-on, we need to add the third-party repository. And you do that by coming over here to the three dots, clicking on repositories, and you're going to add a URL here. Now the URL can be gotten. You can get the URL by scrolling down on this page here. And here is the following URL for the third-party repository. So I'm going to copy the link address, back over to Supervisor. I'm going to paste it in here, and I'm going to add. And if it works the way it's supposed to, you'll get another repository, and you'll see here the Almond Has.io, an unofficial add-on. And we can go ahead and close this out, because we can see over here now that it's already added this unofficial add-on to our add-on store. And I can click on that next, and I'm going to go ahead and install this. And this will take a few seconds to install. Okay, now it's installed. We can go ahead and start it up. And I'm going to watch the log, or just check the log and see what's going on here. So it hasn't registered Home Assistant because we haven't done that yet. So it's up and running, but we're not able to use it in Home Assistant. However, it does have a web UI, and the first thing you're going to need to do is create a password in the web UI. So let's go ahead and open the web UI up. You'll see it says, "Welcome to Almond." Open Privacy Preserving Virtual Assistant, click to access. And what it's asking me to do now is configure a password. So I'm going to go ahead and put one in. And you need to read through the consent form. This is a beta software or a software in test, and they're still learning. It's all of this stuff. They're trying to get it to work better, and all the things that come with a brand new piece of software. And so they talk about your rights and risks and benefits. And if you want to agree to the consent or consent to the research, we can go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and click that. And now you have a web interface, and you can do things in this web interface right now. One of the things I can potentially do is type in a command, and I think this one's funny. And I told it to go get a dad joke, and then of course it returns the dad joke. Now, right now, there's no interaction with Home Assistant. It can't do anything. If I were to tell it to turn on a light right now, I'm going to pick a specific light. It's going to say I need to enable Home Assistant before I can use that command. Now, I don't want to do this button. I don't want to click here because this takes you off to the cloud version of this Almond instance, which, by the way, you can run it in the cloud. If we look over here, there is the ability, and this gives you a little bit of the block diagram of how the flow works. Almond server knows about Home Assistant in your data. It executes your sentences. That's what the server on Home Assistant does. The LuaNet is the neural network that converts your sentences into think-talk programs. And then Thingpedia are the skills that provide the building blocks for think-talk programs. So there's these different components that make up this whole setup. And for Home Assistant, we need to go over to Home Assistant and actually create an integration that bridges the gap between these two things. So I'm going to go back over to my Home Assistant setup. Oh, and before I do that, let me show you this, and I apologize for bouncing around. But if we look at my skills, all you're going to see are the new skills that come default with the server. Smart speaker, a test device, miscellaneous interfaces, the server, and then dad jokes. When we add Home Assistant, we should see a whole bunch more stuff show up here in our skills. Now, I will give you a warning, and please pay attention to this warning. I'm going to use the wake word computer a bunch in the video coming up. If you have a smart speaker that uses that wake word, you need to mute it, or watch this with headphones, or watch this in a different room from where your smart speaker is. So keep that in mind. I will repeat it. I'm going to use the wake word computer while I play with this. So make sure that you mute your computer, enable, or your wake word devices that use headphones or whatever. Okay, so let's go over to Home Assistant now, and let's go ahead and add the integration that we will need for that integration or for that skill to show up. And you can see that it found Almond right here. So we're going to click on Configure. It's going to ask you if you want to configure the Home Assistant to connect to Almond, and I do. And that's now completed. Now, if we go back over to Almond and we refresh our skill page, we should see a bunch of Home Assistant rules in here. Now, if it doesn't work, then you need to restart the add-on for it to pick it up. So I'm going to go ahead and do that because refreshing the page doesn't show any new skills here. And by the way, I misspoke earlier. The dad jokes thing I added by configuring a new skill and clicking it from the list here. So it's not part of the default. All right, so back to my skills. I'm going to restart the add-on. So we're going to go back over to the add-on store under Supervisor. Go to Almond Edge and then restart. And once it restarts, it should pick up all of the skills that we need for Home Assistant. And now it's restarted. It may ask me to log in. If you get the bad gateway, it's not quite up yet. And then anytime you restart the add-on, you typically have to log back in. Now, you won't spend a lot of time in this interface if you're planning on using this for just voice control. I go in here when I'm troubleshooting because I want to see what it's hearing me say and then what it's trying to speak back. Okay, look at that. So now you have Home Assistant, and it's via the gateway. And these are all the new skills it found. These are all things that it knows about from your Home Assistant setup. And you can actually see some of this in the logs. It can see all of these entities that have been added inside of these skills. And then, of course, some other stuff related to the SSL or the website stuff. Now, let me caution you here. I've been playing with this a little bit, and I have done some really interesting things on my network. I have told it to turn off a specific light. It ends up turning off all of my switches, including ones that I never turn off, like my attic air handler, my washing machine, and various other things. This is still a work in progress, but you have to be very careful now what you say, because you could end up flipping all kinds of switches on or off, or turning things off if it didn't hear anything. Okay, so some other configuration things let's talk about under the add-on section. So under configuration, you need to make sure that the audio section is using the devices that you have configured. In my case, I am using for input, which is the microphone. I talked about that Samson microphone. I'm using the I'm using, and actually it doesn't show up here because it was turned off on reboot. This is where it gets tricky for these devices. For output, I can use the C Media headphone output. And that's the little headphone jack on my USB adapter that's plugged into my Odroid. For input, I want to use the Samson device, but it was turned off when I rebooted my computer or rebooted my device. So what I'm going to have to do now is if you add a new audio device to your Odroid or your Raspberry Pi, you typically have to reboot it in order for it to show up. And I don't see it here. I'm just going to save this for now, and it will restart the add-on. If you're curious what devices you have for audio on your Raspberry Pi or your Odroid, you can actually go into your supervisor and you can look at system and you can pull down the audio log here. Let me move out of the way here. You can pull down the audio log and you'll get a list of things it knows about. So I turned on my Samson Technologies Go mic, and let's see, I don't know, it doesn't have a time on it. It may or may not pick this up without rebooting, but let's go back over to the add-on and let's see if it sees it as one of my audio device choices under configuration. It does not. So I'm going to go ahead and reboot my host, not just supervisor, but I'm going to reboot the host right here and make sure that it picks up this audio device while it's on. Now, if you have something plugged in, like what I ordered, the little USB microphone, and it's always plugged into your device, you shouldn't have an issue with this. But I had turned it off in between things here. So let me reboot. And when I reboot, come back here in a moment, we should see that as part of the add-on. Okay, Home Assistant is now starting back up again. So let's just see what we get here. It's interesting now in the later version of Home Assistant, it now tells you what it's doing as it's starting up. It used to just say, I'm starting up and I'll be done in a minute. Now it tells you what things are actually starting, which is kind of cool. Back to the add-on store now, over to Almond, actually dashboard here. And we're still missing icons, so it's still not quite fully up and running. Let's just give it a second or two more. Okay, configuration. And it still has my C Media USB analog speaker or output there. And now you can see that it has the Samson Go Mic mobile analog stereo for the input. So I can look at this and I can watch the logs as it's going along here. All right, it's restarting. So it's giving all the processes the term signal. Now it's restarting here. Engine started.
Hello. How can I help you?
Okay, I don't know if you heard that or not, but I went ahead and I plugged in one of the speakers I found laying around the house. And that way I'm not using the headphones. I'm using an actual speaker in order to play this out of that. So what that means is we can go into Almond now. And I'm going to look at conversation. It'll make me log in because everything's restarted. And I can make it talk to me. So the first thing I'm going to do is make it talk to me. Again.
How are false teeth like stars? They come out at night.
I don't know how well you can actually hear that. Put it up to the mic and I'll do another one.
I don't play soccer because I enjoy the sport. I'm just doing it for kicks.
All right, enough of the dad jokes for now. But what we are going to do is we're going to try a couple of commands. I'm going to try the dad joke command with a voice. You know, I'm using this little microphone here, which is part of the Samson Go Mobile. I wouldn't do this on a production setup because I'm not going to let my mobile mic do this. But we're going to try it. So I'm going to say, computer, get dad joke. And if it hears you, which it should have, I heard a response. it should play it. It should show it here and then play it back, but it doesn't sound like it worked. One of the issues I have using this setup that I've got now is the fact that I've got audio level adjustments on the microphone itself, and so I could be getting some wonky audio. It's hard for me to tell. But if you do say the wake word, remember I'm going to use computer as the wake word. So if you have a smart speaker, now's the time to mute it. But if you hear the beep, that means that the system understood the wake word. So computer, get dad joke. See, and for whatever reason, and again, this is very new, and it's still a work in progress. We'll talk about bug reports here in a second, but it should hear me. I'm going to put it closer. Computer, get dad joke. And I'm not sure what's going on here necessarily because it should be replaying or putting it up here. Let's check the logs and see if we get anything in the log. So it's detecting the wake word. Oh, and I'm not sure. It's hearing some of the ignore because wake word is missing. So let me refresh and let's just see what it does again. Computer, get dad joke.
Did you hear about the two thieves who stole a calendar? They each got 6 months.
I don't know if you can hear that, but you can certainly see it on the screen. So let me put it up closer to this. Computer, get dad joke.
You will never guess what Elsa did to the balloon. She let it go.
Okay, so let's try something more important to what we're trying to do here, which is with our home assistant business. So I'm going to try this. I'm going to look at some lights I have here. And you have to be careful the way you have things named. It's not as smart as maybe some of the other smart speakers that we're using out there, only because it's very literal on the device names. So if you have something with a bunch of underscores in the device name, it's not going to know what it is. So I'm going to try, again, I'm going to try to do this without having to hold the microphone and put the speaker up. So let's try turning on a light. Computer, turn on study. And it should be this light here if it works.
Sorry, I did not understand that. Can you rephrase it?
Yeah, so what it's doing is I'm not sure if it's still booting up and there's a little bit of a delay going on here. When I tested this initially, it was pretty fast and worked pretty well. So let's look over here. The light's off. I'm going to try to turn this one on, but it didn't hear the actual word. So let's try again. Computer, turn on study. And it may just be that I'm too far away or I've got the volume set wrong on the mic. Computer, turn on study.
I turned on your study light switch.
All right, so that works. I'm not going to blame this on the system itself. And, I should have waited till I had the microphone before testing, but I wanted to kind of put together a little proof of concept here before I go into more detail on this or spend more time with it, see if it even is worth it. So it worked, right? It did pick it up. I just have where I have the microphone set may be an issue with what I'm doing. So I'm going to try to turn it off now. Computer, turn off study. And it hasn't done it yet. So let's do it again. Computer, turn off study. Computer, turn off study.
I turned off your study light switch.
And we can look over here and see that it's off. So it may just be the microphone placement. And I can't really test that because I have no way to know what the input looks like. So let's do one more. Computer, turn on kitchen island. See, and I hear that second beep, which means it probably didn't hear anything. Computer, turn on kitchen island. As you can see, it's not quite ready for prime time yet. I'm going to play with it some more when I have the other microphone that I'm using, so I don't have issues with maybe volume or whatever. Could be overdriving it. So I'm going to try this. Computer, turn on kitchen island.
I turned on your kitchen island switch.
Now you can see that on. So let's try one more. Computer, turn on kitchen counter. Computer, turn on kitchen counter.
I turned on your kitchen counter switch.
Let's try one more. Computer, turn on front hall. Seems like it takes a couple of times when I do this. Computer, turn on front hall. Computer, turn on front hall.
I turned on your front hall light switch.
Okay. So it may be microphone placement. I don't think that it was, or volume of the microphone or something like that. This is an interesting test. It does do what it says it's going to do. It's all about dealing with the levels and everything else, which may be better with a different type of microphone. This is a professional microphone, and it has, like I said, volume control settings, and it may be overdriving it a bit. I've experimented with setting it in different levels here, and it may be different. Let me see if I can turn off. I've got 3 lights on now. Let me see if I can turn these 3 lights off. Computer, turn off front hall.
I turned off your front hall light switch.
Okay, now let's do computer, turn off kitchen island.
I turned off your kitchen island switch for you.
Computer, turn off kitchen counter.
I turned off your kitchen counter switch.
Okay, so that seems better. I adjusted the volume one more time on my Samson microphone, and the input level is probably better. So I think it has a lot to do with it. Now, what I haven't tried to do is play with things like noisy rooms. Is it going to pick me up in a noisy room with a bunch of people screaming? What does it do when it's got constant input and it's trying to filter out the input for the rest of the words that are going on? So those are things that I know that our current smart speakers are good at. They basically ignore everything else until they hear the wake word. And this web page talks about adding issues. And let's see what we have for issues right now. So you can do things like Spotify, of course. And if you look at the skills on here, you can see some of the skills that they've already got included. Searches, dictionaries, Spotify, Twitter, COVID stuff, Forasmatic quotes, RSS feeds. I mean, there's a bunch of different things you can do on here, even weather. And I'm not sure what weather will do for us, but let's just try it out. Computer, get the weather.
Where are you now?
Alaska. Computer, Anchorage, Alaska.
It is drizzling today in Anchorage, Alaska 995012118, and the temperature is 41°F.
Okay, so you can try different things with it. So it has some of the capability of a smart speaker that we use now, but it's all local. When it comes to issues on there, make sure that you are reporting it, because the whole point of this right now is they're still developing it and they need to hear about issues and ways to make it work better. So wrong URL to HA instance skill shown, repeated light off, clicking on device results in error, pulse audio crashes, console errors, and then other stuff like this. So you can report it. If you're playing around with this, this is not for someone who's wanting to plug something in and walk away and just have it work. This is something that is brand new in the way they're building it here. And it's going to take some time for them to get it working, but it's going to require us to help them with feedback. So if you're interested in playing around with something fun, get yourself a setup like this. You know, maybe keep it on your desk or whatever. For you, if you've got a family, you don't want your family trying to use this. They're going to potentially hate you after this if you try to get them to use this. But it's good for playing around with, good for developing, and then once it gets to a certain level, it's going to be great for in-house or localized control of things versus going out to the cloud. Now, a couple things I want to point out that occurred to me. Whenever I was doing this, I said a couple of things. I said it didn't pick up all my words, so I said turn off. And what it did was turned off all of my switches. Like I said before, everything in the house went off, including things I don't even have control over right now. So my attic air handler, I can see that, but I don't have a switch for my washing machine. It's just on a power meter type switch. It shut it off. And I can't be 100% sure, but if I look at my skills here, and I look for my cameras or Unify or something like that, all of my PoE switches turned off, which means it turned all of my cameras off. And I don't know if that's something that somehow it did. I don't see anything for Unify in here, but I don't know when I said turn off the switches, it just turned off all my PoE stuff. That could be coincidental to something else, but all of my PoE camera switches went off, or PoE ports on my cameras on my switches went off, but I don't see any skills that would actually do something with that. So that's an interesting side note. If it just turns things off. If it doesn't hear the word, it will assume you mean everything and turn it all off, which is probably not what you want to have happen. Again, this was just something that was fun to play with. A little bit of work with new AI stuff that you can keep localized. It's a work in progress. Make sure if you use this that you're giving feedback to the developers so that they can make it better, and then keep up to date with the updates. In fact, I installed it yesterday and I already had a new update this morning for the Almond server. If you have any questions, throw those down in the comments down below. If you're not a subscriber, I'd love for you to subscribe to my channel and then hit that thumbs up button if you liked the video. I'm on Discord. I will answer questions as I have time on Discord as well. Let's see. I think that's it. We'll see you on the next video.